The time Steve Hackett had to make a big decision. We've all had these crossroads in our lives. Do I stay in this job and go broke even though I love this job? Do I want to be a painter for the rest of my life? I can't sell my paintings. But there's always you've dealt with this where you come to a point where going, I really like this. It's kind of a cool thing. But if I continue doing this, I will go broke. Steve Hackett was part of a supergroup along with Steve Howe of Yes. But there were problems. We'll find out on Rock History Music. You know, every time I talk to you, someone asks me, I always say, oh, do you have any questions? And every time I talk to you, I get more audience questions than any other artist. And God knows I've been doing this 40 years, but GTR always comes up.
Yes.
The exit of that band because
we had a hit album in America and in Canada, but we had a bankrupt company in England supporting it, so it just ran out of cash. That's as simple as it is. The album cost rather more than was intended, and it was very, I didn't want to lose my house. That was it. So much as it was an ideal situation in many ways, practicality has to take over. So there's a studio album, there's a live album, and some of the things I did for GTR that didn't get recorded, I recorded on an album called Feedback 86, which came out many, many years later and is about to be re-released, but it has Brian May and Bonnie Tyler, Chris Thompson, some of the Marillion guys on it, and that was very interesting. Marillion rhythm section, Pete Trewavas and Ian Mosley, who I saw last night, funnily enough, at Cirque du Soleil in London. So that was very interesting. That's the kind of GTR connection that I'm saying. But in a way, it was intended to be a follow-up to GTR, but I didn't quite have the high-powered management setup that GTR had at the time. So it's one of those, this is going to have to wait a while. And I went off and did an acoustic album at the time just to keep my hand in. Really, I did an album called Momentum. More information than you need, but if you get all these questions from people, maybe that fills in some of the gaps for them.
You know, I was listening just before we got on. I went back and I listened to, we talked about the new albums in the last two chats. But listening to your first three albums, my first thought was, were any of the songs from the first three albums, like Voyage of the Acolyte and Please Don't Touch, are any of those songs, were they songs that were brought to Genesis and somehow they didn't think it?
Some were. And there will be a certain amount of Genesis reject about them. But then the thing about Genesis was that if you stuck around long enough, you could represent the same idea, which had familiarity going for it. And sometimes last year's reject would be this year's hit, to quote I Know What I Like, for instance. I think you must always do that with the band. I think in any art, anyone who writes, anyone who does anything creative, maybe the best thing you can find in the I Ching, if we're going to quote the Chinese ancient sages, is the idea of work on that which has been spoiled. And art is perfect for that, because you can always repaint the same painting, you can always rewrite, re-record the same song. Unlike painting, of course, songwriters are required to perform that same song. So, here's a 50-year-old classic, or 51 years old in the case of musical box. Whereas a painter, generally speaking, is not required to recreate anything in particular. Rembrandt's greatest hits, and here it comes again. The Night Watch. It's funny how music develops in this way, where familiarity is part of the package. That's really what you have to do. You have to make, or each song has to make a friend of all of those potential listeners. It's each song, when it really works, it's like a world unto itself. And you think there's nothing quite like this song. Whoever did it, there'll never be another Eleanor Rigby. No matter if you have Marcato strings and a sympathetic lyric, it still won't sound like that. You can't possibly. So you get something that's the epitome of the form. I guess epiphanal is the word, and luckily, I'm still making a noise for a living, and it feels wonderful to be playing in front of people again.
What was the atmosphere like with The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway? What was that? I know that was the last one for Peter. What was that atmosphere like with that tour and recording that album?
Much more difficult. I think when a band starts to grow up and pull apart, that's always hard. As soon as people are suddenly, there are wives, there are families, there are children. Suddenly, the idea of doing what you did in your teens, which was the boys' club, suddenly, it's necessary that there's an invasion of the outer limits of life coming to bear on it. Everyone's got to grow up sometime, and bands do have fault lines right down the middle. We all want to be the Musketeers and go all for one and one for all. Well, what about my wife and children? So I think that was much more difficult. Peter Gabriel had pressures at that time. It was a difficult birth, and so he was diving between London and Headley Grange. It was tricky, and he was really working in one room, and the band was working in another. Yes, we came together, of course. It turned into a double album. There are those who say it may have been stronger as a single album, but then again, what would you leave on and what would you leave off? It is what it is, and if anyone wants to, have their favorites, fine. I mean, its high points are exquisitely beautiful. The other aspects to it, I think there's a claustrophobic feeling that I get when I listen to it, in its entirety. But I love the individual parts that go with it. And here's me thinking, of course, densely packed lyrics. Pete's trying to get the story over. Densely packed keyboard parts. The irresistible force meets the immovable object, and there's this huge collision. If collision was ever used to describe one piece of music, it would be this one. Different schools of thought, individuals, pulling in different directions. Funnily enough, we've been mixing the title track, Lamb Lies Down on Broadway itself, which I think is a great piece of work, instrumentally. Nowhere to run, nowhere for the guitar to move on it at all. Just to color it slightly. But there's something very, very beautiful about it. It's unique, isn't it? It's got that sort of the antique quality and the kind of, I don't know, not quite the sacred and the profane of Devil's Cathedral, but the aspect of the drawing room keyboard sound meets the steampunk of Pete on that. It's different. It's different worlds, or proto-punk, I ought to say, perhaps, because the idea of rail as a punk, and it wasn't Genesis that invented punks, and it wasn't the Sex Pistols. The word punk appears in Shakespeare, and you look it up in the dictionary, and it means a rubbishy person. Here you are. But that album had aspects of that, so it's a kind of highly decorated album.
Would you do it live when it's?
Would I personally do it live? I think that I would probably leave it to others to do live. I know that other people have done it live. I took it around the world myself, first time out, and for me, there are some guitar moments on it which are lovely, but I feel in the main, its predecessor and successors had more room for the guitar to move. As I say, it's very hard to get a look in through the lyrics and vocals and the keyboards, very densely packed. What do you do? I can't play a guitar solo over that, just can't do it. But I could do it on Fly on a Windshield and parts of the Lamia, which are very beautiful. It's those Genesis changes, those lead chords that the band were capable of producing. That kind of orchestral spirit that's part and parcel of what we now think of as prog.
Get Me Out, that's my favorite guitar solo on the whole album. It just spoke to me. I love that song.
Right. Let me. I'm just going to look up this one here because, Get Me Out. You like that one? Yeah, that's. There's more shredding going on there. Get Me Out. It's a kind of dance of death. It's the album, in some ways, the album at its most circusy, but there's sort of the grotesque aspect of the circus, an imagined nightmare circus. That's what that's all about. I'm very proud of the way that track sounds. It sounds like an enormous guitar at the beginning and on the riff, but it's actually it's heavily tracked, both with guitars and with keyboards. So we've got some mellotron brass in there, some organ, and a very high part sounding a bit like a synth, but it's on guitar, sort of echoey type thing. Gives it a spookiness, slight sort of Zeppelinification on it, I guess, but the spookier end of bluesy stuff.
Ghost Moon and Living Love, that is gorgeous. That is so angelic, great tune. And near the end, it sounds like your earlier Genesis work to me. Tell me about that song.
Love song. I was influenced by, there's a band called Dare, an English band, British band, I should say. And I was very taken with their work, and I was trying to channel the singer, Darren Wharton, who's got this incredible vibrato with his voice, just got a great voice. And I didn't end up sounding remotely like him, but I was trying to get this impassioned vibrato thing. And my God, do I have to go around the houses to get it? But, it's a challenge. Later on in the song, once again, I did harmonies at the end. And some of it I'd written right back in 1969. I had a little sequence that sounded, a descending sequence that sounded a little bit Beatlesque. But once again, I did the harmonies and I thought, sounds a little dull. once again, I said, Amanda, do you think you could do harmonies on this? And she did. And it sounded a little soft. And I said, do you think you could do them more strident? So she did. And then we got it into the picture. And once again, if you think the other thing sounded a bit Crosby, Stills, then there's this kind of harmony sound that we kind of make between us. And she adds the sunshine. That's her voice. So we do harmonies together. Nad is on one of the tracks. He's on not Found and Lost, Taking You Down. That's his voice.
Yeah.
On that. We handled the rest of the vocals, and right at the beginning of that, he said it's gorgeous. The melody right at the beginning, which is Amanda singing in a kind of semi-operatic way. That was a melody that I dreamt. I was suffering from swamp fever. I'd been on the Louisiana swamps some years ago, and I swallowed swamp water, not because I went for a swim, but because there was a storm. The storm is up and that fan is going at the back.
Yeah.
So it's all drumming up a storm, and I ended up swallowing swamp water, and I got sick for about 2 weeks. And it wasn't until I hit New York that, because I was on tour at the time, I hit New York and I had this extraordinary dream, and I heard this wonderful melody with a woman's voice, and it was as if the clouds parted. The pain that I had, the alien that was in my stomach, just went. And I remembered the melody. I wrote it down straight away, and I sang it to her, and I was looking for the optimum key for her. So I think we recorded it, if I remember correctly, it might be in the key of F. Could be wrong, don't quote me. I don't have perfect pitch or perfect memory. But
Neither.
She
None of
sounded
us
lovely on the beginning of it. Set up the song in a very kind of classical, kind of cross between Hollywood and classical and operatic and all that kind of thing, to set up the song. So it's a kind of multi-layered love song, really.
You know, you speak like a painter. When I hear you speak, and this is, like I said, the fourth time I've talked to you, you're very eloquent when you describe your songs, and it's like listening to Joni Mitchell talk about her songs. And other fans have noticed that too, that you speak like a painter. You've gotten into the right business. Let me just say that.
It's a funny thing, isn't it? Because, you know, my dad was a painter, and strangely enough, we didn't have that many conversations about painting, but I think that the way it surfaced with me, I know that Peter Gabriel described me as a colorist at one point, and I think that sound coloring can mean anything. It can mean an acoustic guitar, a triangle, or a full-blown orchestra. All those things are coloring. The top line and chords, that's a whole other matter. But how do you flesh it out? Something like, you know, coloring. You consider what George Martin brought to John Lennon's demo of "I Am the Walrus," and the song is saved through the colouring because it becomes an oil painting in his hands. And I know that Jeff Emmerich felt the same way, that the song was saved and characterised mainly by what was constructed around it. Same thing for Queen as well. Yeah. You listen to all the Queen's work, and I worked a little bit with Brian May on different projects, and I said, the things that characterize that are the way, you use these multi-layered vocals and multi-layered guitars. That's it. So that band, as arrangers, works in that way. The Beatles, at their best, I think, sometimes down tools and let other people take over. Taking it to the mountains, or letting the angels take over.
Were you? There was no asking you about the Genesis reunion, right? That was always going to be the trio, the latest reunion, right?
I think there hasn't been a serious conversation about this, about putting together the team of 71 to 75. since 2005. So no, I haven't been approached about that. And my British tour was already on sale for 2 or 3 months before that. So they were going to be playing the British Isles at the same time. So I don't think there was any thought at that time that they were going to give me a call to do that. So yes, of course, I'm always open to that. But I think realistically, I figure that by the time they manage to get their cancelled shows, reinstated, they'll be prioritizing the 80s version. I'll be celebrating the 70s version.
Hope you enjoyed that. Remember, join our newsletter where you get updates on all our videos once, sometimes twice a week, because we would think that YouTube would make sure that all our subscribers get notified when we release a new video, which is 3-4 times a week, usually, at least. But it doesn't happen. Join our newsletter. We'll make sure you get access to all our videos. We'll send you 1 or 2 newsletters a week. And as a member of our newsletter, we're giving away prizes, by the way. Rock and roll books, box sets, CDs, and LPs. So you'll get a chance at that. The link is in the description. Also, you'll also find right in the description a link to our Patreon where you'll get early access to all our videos. There's a PayPal link there if you want to give a donation. And we love it when you subscribe to our channel. Share our videos like this video. Share it on Genesis groups or progressive rock groups on Facebook. Like our videos and comment on them as well. I'm John Bowden. This is Rock History Music. Take care of yourself.